right. Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar on how to manage critical content with Gimmal and Box. We appreciate you all being here. And the first thing I would like to do is take a second and introduce our speakers today. My name is Sean Ennis, and I am the Marketing Operations Manager here at Gimmal. And I am joined by our key speaker today, the Director of Sales Engineering, Dean Meisenheimer. But before we get started, I'd like to go through a few housekeeping items. We'll have a live Q&A after today's session, so please feel free to submit questions throughout the webinar. And at the end, we'll answer as many questions as we can. If you have any technical difficulties, feel free to send us a message and let us know, and we can help you resolve those issues that you might be having. First, I have a few slides here to tell you a little bit about Gimmal. Gimmal is a records management software company that was founded in 2002. We have a services team and global network of partners that have been delivering solutions with us for more than 17 years. Our primary technology partners are Microsoft and SAP. Our implementation partners include small specialty SIs with specific areas of expertise, as well as large global SIs and consultants like PwC and Lockheed Martin. And with over 500,000 licensed users and growing, we have a strong community of some of the best clients in the world. So that's a little bit about us. And now I'm going to hand it over to our key speaker, Dean, who will walk you through a little bit more about Gimmal and Box.
All right, thanks, Sean. You know, we're here primarily to talk about records management today, and specifically records management with Box. But Gimmal has a broad platform of products. The first being Gimmal Records Management, that allows you to manage the entire life cycle of records, physical or electronic, across your whole organization, regardless of where those records may be stored at. In addition to our records management product, we also have a content governance product for SharePoint, which is really designed to make SharePoint more usable, make it easy to really automate the classification and organization of content in both SharePoint and SharePoint Online. And last but certainly not least, our document management for SAP product, which is an SAP Archive Link certified solution that allows you to archive content and data from SAP into, outside of the SAP database into SharePoint Online or SharePoint On-Prem as an archive solution. So that's the core of the Gimmal product stack. We're really here to talk about records management today, excuse me. So let's get into that. So a typical organization that we run into today, right? We talk to a lot of different clients, and what we discover is even if a company has standardized on a platform like Box, right? They've gone out, they've surveyed the market, they've said, Box is our platform. This is where we want all of our content to live. This is where we want content to be stored so that we have access to it. We can collaborate on it. We can work with it. Even if that's the case in a lot of organizations, what's happened is over time, there are legacy applications, some of the older ECM platforms that are out there that may be around, that may be used for very specific business applications. There are other systems that may have been brought in as a result of acquisitions, right? Through merger and acquisition activities. You acquire a company, they have a different system. It takes a while to potentially migrate the information over, or it's just too expensive. So you kind of let it run and maintain for a while. And what happens is over time, and quite frankly, then there's always the file shares. Everybody still has file shares as much as we would prefer not to. But, what happens over time is you kind of find yourself in this situation where you've got a corporate standard, but then you've got these kind of other, we'll call them rogue repositories for lack of a better term. And, it's no secret within the organization, information gets created at a pretty high volume, right? We get bombarded with information every day. We're creating a ton of new content. A lot of that content needs to be managed as formal records. And there's all these different repositories out there. And what happens is employees use what they're familiar with, or sometimes what's easiest. right? So even though you may have said we want everything to go here, sometimes they just get confused and put things in the wrong spot. Or they have a system they're used to using because they came over as part of the M&A. So they just keep putting stuff there, and you start to wind up with a lack of consistency. There's information all over the place. How that information is managed, how that information is governed isn't consistent, right? The retention policies placed on stuff is going to vary. And you don't have visibility into really what's being managed and how it's being managed. And what this winds up creating is a bit of chaos, right? And more importantly, it creates risk. If you don't know what you have out there and you don't know how it's being managed, how can you control that? How can you ensure that you're adhering to both your internal policies as well as external regulatory policies you may fall under? It also leads to inefficiency, especially on the, for your compliance team, your records management team, and you wind up with kind of dark data. You don't know what's out there and information gets lost. Well, what Gimmal provides is a way to manage your enterprise information in place. And by in place, what we mean is the content lives where it's at. It never leaves its respective repository. If your content is in Box, it stays in Box. It doesn't get moved out to another repository somewhere to be managed as a record. What that gives your records management and your compliance team is visibility now and control, so that if I do have records in multiple locations, right? My records are in Box, but I've got some over here on file shares, and I've got some in a legacy content management system. I can have a single view as a records manager of where all those records are at. I can see how they're being managed. I can ensure there are consistent policies being applied across all of that. And I've got a single web-based user interface to see all that. And what that does is, one, it creates better efficiency. I'm not having to bounce between different systems to figure out what's out there. My productivity goes up, but more importantly, the risk goes down, and the ability to maintain consistent compliance across all this information goes up. And so Gimmal Records Management is the tool that obviously provides this. It's a web-based SaaS offering that it can get you deployed in literally a matter of days. By being a SaaS application, we can spin up a tenant, get the connectors into your Box repository and others you may have, and get records under control in a very short amount of time. The key benefits that Gimmal brings to the table: one, I can manage my records in place in Box or in other content sources with our federated approach. Nothing needs to be migrated. Nothing needs to be pulled into a central repository anywhere. The content stays where it's at. The users can find it and work with it. Your records managers now have a single view. Plus, we can work in conjunction with extensions to the Box platform, right? Gimmal, we announced just before BoxWorks that Gimmal is an official Box partner. And we've integrated with a Box platform, both the core content services as well as the ability to work with extensions like Box Governance, Box Drive to bring information in from the desktops, the mobile apps, Relay for process management, right? We can work with the entire platform so that as you're bringing content into Box as your core content management platform, and you're leveraging the services that Box brings to bear, we can work within, that same ecosystem. Third, paper still exists. As much as we may not want it to, paper still exists. And so a lot of organizations have physical records that need to be managed alongside their electronic records. And Gimmal Records Management provides the ability to not just manage electronic records in Box, but also manage your physical records that may be sitting in file rooms, may be sitting in warehouses, may be offsite with third-party providers. And again, have a consistent view of all those records that are being managed. The centralized file plan management, and we'll show you some examples of that, ensure that I have consistency in how my policies are being applied, and simplifies the record management task for the compliance team. And then most importantly, the automated record classification minimizes any change management for your user base. As a Box user, I can add information to the repository, fill out whatever metadata, go about my job. In the background, Gimmal Records Management is handling the classification of those records and applying the policy. And as a records manager, I can centrally review and approve disposition of any record, whether that's a physical record sitting in a warehouse, an electronic record in Box, or a record sitting out on a network file share somewhere. I've got a single view of that information and how to manage it. And what that ultimately leads to is better visibility. As a records manager, I have one web-based interface. I can see all of my records that are being managed. I can see how they're being managed, what policies are being applied. I've got findability, right? I can filter, search, report, and see what's out there for all of my records, right? I don't have to go to one system for physical, another system for electronic, or bounce between different content management systems. So with that, let's jump into a demo, show you what this all looks like, and then we'll come back and take some questions at the end. Oops, there we go. So you should be seeing 3 blue pie charts across the screen now. This is the user interface for Gimmal Records Management. As we talked about, it's a SaaS offering, web-based. Allows me to connect to different repositories. You can see here from this instance of Gimmal Records Management that I'm managing records in Box. I've also got some records sitting out on a network file share, plus I have physical records being managed. So from a single instance of Gimmal Records Management, I'm managing three records in 3 different locations out there. Gimmal Records Management uses what we call connectors to connect into different repositories. So there's a connector for Box that allows me to reach into Box, crawl, index, and identify the content that's there and apply record policy. There are connectors for file shares. There's a physical records extension, and there are connectors for a variety of different content management platforms out there. And what Gimmal does is when it identifies content in one of these sources, it will crawl and extract the properties off of the records. And those properties are what are stored in the Gimmal Records Management database. So we take those properties and then we run through, as I mentioned before, an automated classification process that will assign records automatically to the different record classes in your file plan. And that's what the right-hand pie chart here shows is out of all of the records in all of those different sources, the vast majority of my records classified just fine. I have a few records that didn't classify for some reason. Maybe it's content we didn't expect. Maybe it's stuff that got dumped out there that shouldn't have. Somebody dumped some content into my Box repository or on my file share that really shouldn't be out there. But I can kind of see and monitor what's going on. And then the central pie chart just shows me of all the record classes that are in my file plan, here are the ones that are most commonly used. My facility records are the most commonly used ones. My administrative records are second most commonly used. My employee management records are the 3rd most commonly used, and so forth. And then in the center of the screen, I can get a quick snapshot as a records manager of here are the most recent records that have been indexed by Gimmal Records Management. It's just kind of a running, running tabulation, so I can see, oh, here's a physical record that was indexed in earlier today, tells me the record class, tells me the name of the record, clearly shows me it's a physical record. Well, here's a record that was brought into Box earlier today. Again, tells me the creation date of the record class it was assigned to. Here's a link to the record. And what's nice about this is, as a records manager, if I want to view this record, assuming I have the privileges to view it, I can click the link, see the record, right? If I want to see more details about the record, I can simply click the ellipsis and it brings up the record detail screen. So here I can see information like here's the title of the record, Here's the record class information. Here's the unique identifier that was assigned to that record by Gimmal Records Management. It's an electronic record. Here is the actual URI to where that record is at in Box. And then here is the life cycle that the record inherited based on the record class it was automatically assigned to. So for any record in the system, and as I scroll through here, I can see I've got box records. I had a physical record there at the top. As I scroll down, we've got some file system records in here. I can always at a glance quickly see information about any of the records that are being brought in. And if I need to, I can take action on those records from here as well, right? So one place so far, one screen, and I've got a pretty good view of what's being managed, where's it at, how's it being classified, what's the retention that's being applied without having to jump anywhere else. That being said, let's jump into Box and take a look at how all this works to an end user. So here I have a Box environment set up, got a few folders set up to represent different organizations within my company. And we're going to start off working in the operations group, right? So we happen to be a company that has different field facilities. So I'm going to go into my operations folder. I'm going to drill down into the facilities folder. And here I have folders for daily operations and for vehicles and equipment. Well, I'm going to open up the vehicles and equipment folder. And I'm going to come in here and I've got a number of different demo files. And so I'm going to go into my plant and property demo files. And let's upload a new standard operating procedure. So we're going to come in here and we're going to grab standard operating procedure, or SOP for short, 25, and we're simply going to drag it and drop it into Box. Nothing unusual here so far from a user standpoint. As a user, I upload a document into Box, do drag and drop. Here's my document. When I click on it, I can see all of the details for the document. And now I can start to add different properties to this document in Box. Well, the first, I happen to have Box Governance installed. So maybe I want to add a classification label to this document. So we want to come in and mark this document, since it's a standard operating procedure, it's for internal use only, not for public distribution. So we're going to apply a classification label to that. And so now you see standard Box behavior. We see the label here. When the document's clicked on, we see the label over here. It tells me what that label restricts me to. And now I can come in and start to fill in other properties. I could put in a description of the document if I like. We know who uploaded it, when, etc. But we're also using metadata templates in Box. So based on the location where I uploaded the document, we have an operations metadata template. So let's take a look at that. Well, here's my document. Here is the here's the metadata template, and you can see that some of the metadata was automatically populated based on the template and the location. There's other information I could come in here and fill in. So maybe I want to set the effective date. We'll make this effective as of the beginning of last month. It's an active SOP, and we're going to save that. But wait, there's more. Maybe we want to add some additional metadata. So we've got another metadata template to associate our documents and records to specific facilities. So now maybe I want to come in and I want to choose from a pull down and say, I want to associate that document to a specific generating station. I'm going to save that. Now I have custom metadata that has been assigned to this document in Box. Well, what's going to happen is, in the background, Gimmal Records Management is monitoring Box. It's looking at my Box environment, and the connector is looking for either new documents that get added or documents that are modified. And when it finds those, it will crawl them and it will extract all of these properties, including things like the classification labels and the metadata template information, and store that in the Gimmal Records Management database, and use that to actually do automated record classification. Now, what if I want to One of the great things about Box is there's a lot of different ways that I can bring information into Box. So maybe I want to come in here and I actually want to bring something in through the desktop integration that Box provides. Well, again, I can come in here and grab a different document and simply drag it and drop it. And we're just going to make a copy of it here into my daily operations folder. So now we've uploaded another document through the Windows Explorer integration. Maybe I'm on a Mac, maybe I'm on a mobile device, right? Using an Android tablet or an iPad. However you're accessing Box and bringing this information in doesn't matter, because I am syncing information into Box. If we come now, when we go back to daily operations, what we're going to see is we're going to see our new SOP that we brought in. And the same is true even if I were to bring information in through something like Microsoft Word. Maybe I'm authoring a document. I want to save that document or upload that document into Box. I can use the integration that Box provides to Microsoft Office, save that document directly into my repository wherever I need to, right? And what's important is, as information is flowing in, because that information is flowing into and being stored in my Box repository, in the background, Gimmal Records Management can see it, it can crawl it, it can extract the metadata, and now apply records policies. And one of the powerful things about the Box platform is it provides integrations to literally thousands of applications out there. Everything from desktop applications to enterprise applications to collaboration tools. So whether you're using Salesforce or Oracle or NetSuite or Slack or DocuSign or Adobe or Microsoft Office or Confluence, or all of these different tools that can integrate and store content into the Box can now have their content brought under records management control. And that's really where the power begins to come into play. Now, what's happened in the background, if we refresh our screen here, I mentioned as we brought the content in, Gimmal Records Management is looking, it's seeing, it's finding that information. And here it found already that first SOP that we brought in. Well, you see it here in the recent records because we recently brought it in. But it tells me again the date, the record class. Here's a link to the document. I mentioned earlier, if I wanted to view the document, I could click it. It's going to take me to that document and open it for viewing with a caveat. I have to have privileges to view the document in Box. So as a records manager, there may be records information I can view about documents, but if I don't have the rights to view the documents in the source repository, I still can't view the content of the document, right? So there's another level of security that can be brought into play there. Okay, so here's my document. If we look at the record details, this is where we'll see this record was captured. Here's the title. Here's the unique identifier that was assigned. It's electronic. Here's the URI to where the record is in Box. Here is the record classification that was assigned based on a combination of where the document was stored and the properties assigned to that document, depending on how our classification rules are set up. Based on the record classification, here's the life cycle that's automatically been assigned to this record. So it's a vehicle ownership record. It is going to be kept until the record is marked as obsolete. And then as soon as that record is marked obsolete, we're going to keep the record for 1 year after that, and then do a dispose and delete. So a pretty simple little life cycle here. The other nice thing is I can take other actions on records from this same screen if I need to. So I could come in here, for example, and as a records manager, maybe I've decided, you know what, I don't like how this was automatically classified. I'm going to override that. So let me come in and choose a different record classification to assign to this record, right? I have the authority to do that as the records manager. I could also declare a record, meaning lock it down, where it now becomes, can't be edited, can't be changed. I can mark records as obsolete or superseded, and we saw if I do mark it as obsolete, that will trigger the life cycle to begin. I can add records to a legal hold. So Gimmal can provide hold management across any of the repositories that I have records in. So I can have a single legal hold managing holds on records in Box, on the file share, and physical records as well. And I can view the audit trails, and I can view the properties. So every record has an audit trail that shows everything that has happened to that record from the time it was originally captured, and I can view the properties. And so that document that you saw me upload at the very beginning, Gimmal Records Management captured the Box Enterprise ID, the Box folder path, we know where it's at in Box, we know the created date, the file name, the file size, the folder it's in, when it was last modified, and then we specifically know it came through the Box connector. Here's the URI, or the path to where that document is in Box. The URI broken down into levels, and now all of the metadata properties. So here is our Box governance classification label. That was captured as part of the properties. Here are all the properties from the metadata templates. This is all information that can be used to both drive classification. Maybe I want to classify internal documents differently than public documents, or how I can trigger the retention. I can use any of these properties to actually be triggers for my retention policies as well. Now, we've talked a lot about electronic records, about bringing records into Box and capturing those. But one of the things we talked about at the beginning is, unfortunately, paper is still around and everybody has physical records as well. And Gimmal Records Management can provide physical records management. So if I click on the physical tab here, it brings me in and allows me to see, hey, here are different locations where I have physical records being stored. And I can see these now directly alongside my electronic records. So maybe I have warehouses where I have my records stored. Maybe I have what we call logical groupings. Doesn't relate necessarily to where the record is sitting, but I can group all of my physical records for a specific operating facility, like I've done here. So if I want to see all the records for my Spearville location, whether they're at Spearville, sitting in the corporate office, or at a third-party storage facility, I have one place I can go to see all of those. I click View the Assets, and here are the boxes that happen to be sitting in that location. And just like electronic records, physical records have properties that are associated to them. So here are all of the properties that describe my physical record. Physical records can have custom metadata templates assigned to them, and physical records can have barcode values assigned as well, right? So I can manage my physical records the same way I manage my electronic records. They're going to fall under the exact same records management policies. So if we come in here and look at Manage Record, I see the Manage Record screen. I see the same information. I see the identifier. I see the record class. But this time it tells me, hey, this is a physical record. And now I can see the life cycle, the visual life cycle of where this record is at. And again, I can take any of the same actions against this record that I can any of my electronic records. And then one of the things unique about physical records is to actually see the record. Unlike an electronic record, right? We click the link, we open it up, we view it. Physical records, I have to request to have them sent to me. So we can manage the request process. We can create requests. We can add physical records to a request if we have one sitting out there. So I could come in and say, well, I need this box of records for safety inspection. Add that to the request, submit it, right, and have that process managed where now in a couple of days, the box of records shows up on my doorstep. And we manage the charge in, charge out status. So as a user, I can always come in here and quickly see what physical records might be charged out to me and when they were charged out. And oops, that was due back a couple of months ago and I've still got it. So I need to return that guy. And I can see what requests that I may have in process. So again, unlike a lot of organizations have to do today, instead of having two completely separate independent systems for managing my electronic records in Box and a spreadsheet or an Access database or some older legacy system for managing my physical files, I can bring that all together under a common view. And as a records manager, I do have that common view. So here I can come in and I can see If I go to my manage screen, I can quickly see a listing of every record that I may have out there. I can see the records, whether they are file share records, physical records, box records. It quickly shows me just a listing. If records have been declared and locked down, I can visually see that. If records have been put on legal hold, I can see that. If I want to filter my view and maybe I'm only interested in records that are related to California, I can see that as well. And guess what? I can view my records according to my file plan as well. So now maybe I want to come in and I actually just want to see all of my records related to a specific facility. We can come in, we can expand our file plan, we can see all of our facility records, we can look at the case file for a specific facility, and now we can see here are all the records associated with that location. Again, these all happen to be in box. Could be some physical records mixed in there as well. And the great thing is, from any of the screens, you'll see consistency in, I can view the information about that record. I can take action on that record if I need to. Again, reclassify it, undeclared if it's been declared, mark it as obsolete, mark it as vital, whatever I need to do as a records manager. I don't have to stop and go somewhere else to take actions. And all this is set up and managed through the file plan, right? As a records manager, I have one place I can come in, I can set up my file plan, I can organize how my records are going to be structured, and this is a system designed for records managers. You've probably already noticed it's very visual in nature. When I'm moving around, if areas can be expanded, I can see that. The little triangle allows me to expand items out. So here, this shows me that I've got a record category for all of my operations records. Within there, I've got all of my different record classifications for my specific types of records. I can get more granular underneath my facility, vehicle, and equipment records. And then I can expand that out and actually even see the individual record case files that have been created for my different facilities. I want to see all the details about this record class and how records are being managed. I can see that. So I can see it's a case-based record class. I can see it has classification rules assigned. It's creating destruction certificates when records are destroyed. I'm creating archive information about the records. Here's the name of the record class, its unique record class code, what organization owns this particular section of the file plan, the life cycle assigned to it. Can vital records be stored here? Yes. Can record declaration or that record locking happen? Yes. And because it's a case-based record class, we actually have a rule to automatically create those case files underneath the record class using some of the metadata template properties. And then the magic, you saw how as a user, I uploaded content in the box multiple ways. And in the background, that content was automatically classified, assigned to a record class, and inherited a life cycle. That's all set up through this same exact screen. So here we have the classification rules for this specific record class, 504010. And the first thing we're doing is looking at when a new record comes in, we look at the properties and say, was the folder name equal to daily operations? So if it came in from box and it's in a folder called daily operations, if that matches, then look at the second rule and look at the metadata value for operations category. Well, if that's set to facilities, if these two rules are true, assign that document to this record class. Well, if something's coming in from the file share, well, file shares don't have as much structure, they don't have metadata. So here I'm just going to take advantage of the path. And if any part of the path has the term daily operations in it, and somebody can't spell well, I want you to automatically assign that file to this record class, right? So I can set up rules like this that can be very powerful, and there are any number of different tokens that can be used depending on the repository. There are some box-specific ones, document-specific ones, as well as system-specific and even physical record-specific. There's any variety of different properties that can be used, different operators that can be used, and I can test against any of those properties that we showed you, that we captured. And then a life cycle. You notice here the little icons indicate if a record class has classification rules associated, if it has a life cycle associated to it. Again, that is all handled and managed through this same screen. I showed you the classification rules. The life cycle can simply be picked from a list of available life cycles, and you can create any number of unique life cycles through this interface and then assign them. So you could have one life cycle that may be used on multiple record classes. You create it once and simply assign it to the record classes you want to use it on. So here are my different record life cycles that have been defined. Some have very specific names, some have more descriptive names. And you'll notice my record classes can be single phase, where they only do one thing. Hey, look at the created date, keep the record 5 years, then do a disposition. Or they can be multiple phases, 2 phases, 3 phases, whatever you need. And if we take a look at this one, here's one where the first phase of the life cycle could do 2 different things. If it's just a working active document, hey, look at the last modified date, keep it for 3 years from that last modified date, and then do a dispose and delete. But if somebody comes in and updates some of the properties on that record and sets a specific property to equal record, now we're going to change what we do. We're immediately going to declare the record, lock it down, and whatever location it may be in, box, physical record, wherever, so it can't be edited. And now we're going to keep it for 5 years from that last modified date, and we're going to do a dispose and delete. So you can build life cycles that can be very intelligent, that can trigger off of any type of information. That one was kind of triggering off of dates, but I can also create life cycles that can trigger off of things like events. Right, so here's an example of a life cycle that's triggering off of an event where a specific asset has been marked as retired. When that happens, the records are declared and locked down. And then from the date the asset was retired, we're going to keep it for 3 years and then ultimately dispose of the record. So Gimmal Records Management gives you the ability to do date-based retention, rules-based retention where we can evaluate properties, and event-based retention, whatever you may need to do. And so at some point in a record's life cycle, it reaches the end of its life cycle and it's ready for destruction. What happens? Well, Gimmal Records Management provides a centralized inbox where I can now see all of my records that are eligible for an action, and most of the time that's disposition. But here we can see where my records are coming in from. I have a number of records that are sitting in box that need disposition. I have a physical record that's eligible for disposition. And I have a case file that's eligible for disposition. Well, you notice the case file doesn't have a specific repository and folder called out because in a case file, my records could actually be in multiple locations, but they've all been added to a case where I can now see all of the records that make up that case in a single view here. And if I want to approve the disposition of the whole case, I can click one button, and whether there are 3 records, 30 records, or 300 records in that case, they'll all be dispositioned with a single action. For my other records, if I wanted to, let's say, approve the disposition of this record here, alpha status for June of 2012, we can come in here and we can see the information about what it's awaiting. Here's its name, here's its record class, here's its ID. It's not a vital record, it's not marked obsolete. It needs approval. Here is the retention life cycle it was under. Here's when it expired, and here's what you're going to approve. I can see everything I need to know before I approve it. And now to approve it, I say approve and submit. I can put in a comment. Whoops. I say I approve. I confirm it, and 2 things happen. First, you notice my inbox count has been decremented, right? So it removes it from the inbox. Secondly, If I go back to my monitor screen, in a moment, we'll see a pending automation action queued up here. And what that is saying is there's a dispose and delete action for this record in the queue, simply waiting for the timer job to run in the background. And when that job runs, in this case, we will reach out to the Box repository and we will destroy that record where it's at rest in Box. We don't need to pick it up and move it anywhere across your network. It's destroyed where it sits in Box. And because it's a dispose and delete, not a dispose and recycle, it should bypass the trash bin. Okay. Lastly, and then we'll open it up for some Q&A. Now, destroying records is always fun, but what happens if somebody comes along in a month and says, hey, do we still have that record? And I say, no, it was destroyed. And they're like, well, why? And I need to justify why that record was destroyed. Well, part of what Gimmal Records Management provides is a record archive. So when I'm setting up my file plan, I can choose for any of my record classifications that when a record is destroyed, I want you to create an archive, piece of archive information about that record. So here is my archive. These are all records that have been destroyed over time, and I can scroll through this and see any of my records. I can come in, I can filter this view looking for specific records. But for any of these, if I want to see the information about this record that was destroyed, I can simply click the ellipsis. It's going to tell me here's the record class, here's the title, here's the unique ID, here's the date and time that that record was destroyed. And if I configured the record class to keep a more detailed archive, I can view the audit trail. Oops, and there's no items on that audit trail. Let's choose a different one here. Oh, no audit trail on that one either. Okay, so this record class didn't apparently keep the audit trail. Let's try this one. There we go. So there's an example of some record classes we're not keeping the audit trail because the records are not that critical. For others, we are. And there were 12 actions that happened from the time this record was first captured and classified until it entered its life cycle, all the way through any other actions that happened up until it was ultimately deleted. And if anyone approved the destruction, that would be captured here in the audit trail as well. And then if we want to see the properties for a record, again, that can be kept as part of the archive. So here we can see all of the record properties for this record that was destroyed. So now if somebody says, why was this destroyed? What was it? I have all of the information I need to back that up. And more importantly, I have a destruction certificate. So this is where I can come in, I can show the destruction certificate. I could view that destruction certificate as a report, print it out, do whatever I need to do with it, right? And the last thing we'll mention is reports. Because I do have all of this information about all of these different records stored in the Gimmal Records Management Database, now have a wealth of information that I can run reports against. I can see what's out there. I can run reports on things like show me all the records that are approaching expiration for a specific record class, or run a report that shows me my entire file plan, right? And by clicking on the report is brought up. Here's my file plan. I can see all of the information I need to know about it. And if I want to export that file plan or that report out, I can save it in any common format and even do some pretty cool things like save it as an Excel file, save it into a box location that may then trigger a relay to route it to a broader audience that never needs to have access to Gimmal Records Management, right? So I can start to combine the different services that are available to me that way. So that's kind of it for the demo. So let's go back to the slides here, and I am going to open it up for Q&A here.
All right. Great. Thank you, Dean, for that demonstration. As Dean mentioned, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to submit them, because now we're going to jump into the Q&A portion. You're also going to see a survey pop up on your screen. And if everyone can just take a quick second and answer those questions, and after the Q&A, we can go through the results as a group, and I think it will be very informative for everybody. All right, so let's see. We have a couple questions. Let's see. If information is downloaded from Box, how does records management apply or track such information?
So, anytime a new document is added to Box, or if a document gets modified in Box, Gimmal Records Management will detect the changes. So for new documents, we'll crawl it, we'll extract those properties. If, let's say, for example, Sean were to come along tomorrow and change some of the metadata properties or add a classification label to a document in Box, Gimmal Records Management sees the change and it captures that change and updates the properties that we're storing in the records database. And you know what? If that has, if that changes how the record may be classified or how retention may be triggered because the data about the document has changed, it would that change would then be applied.
Okay, perfect. Next question is, does Gimmal Records Management keep the records in Box or move them out?
The records are stored in Box. The binary file, the document, the Word file, the PDF, whatever it may be, always stays in Box. So when we create the lock on something, it's, we're locking it in Box. When we disposition a record and destroy it, it's being dispositioned from Box. We're never picking it up and moving it out of its source repository.
Okay, perfect. Just a reminder, we do have the poll up, so please take a few minutes to answer those three or four questions that we have for you. Next question is, can Gimmal Records Management work with Box governance?
Yes, you actually saw an example of that where I was using the classification labels during the demonstration. Those are exposed as part of Box governance. You can use legal holds in Box governance to apply holds on Box content. That's not going to conflict with Gimmal. So we can absolutely work with Box governance, and for clients that do have governance, it opens up some additional things we can do, with the connector. So okay. Absolutely.
Fantastic. Are metadata templates in Box captured by Gimmal Records Management?
Yes. So you again, you kind of saw in the demo there how I entered specific metadata about a facility location, and the documents inherited metadata templates based on being placed in that operations folder. That was all part of the properties that showed up in Gimmal Records Management, and we even used part of that metadata to automatically generate the case file names underneath some of the record classes.
Okay. And we got one more, it looks like. Can Box Relay be used with Gimmal Records Management?
Absolutely. So I mentioned an example, one of the ways that we've used it is create a report. I want to route that report to a very broad audience or make it available to a broad audience that are maybe not records managers. And I can store that document into Box. When I do, that triggers a relay to route that around for people to review. So there's, we absolutely can leverage those types of services.
And we got another question here. How is email managed in Gimmal Records Management? On that a little bit.
Yeah, so email, if you have emails or attachments to emails that need to be managed as records, our suggestion is you really need to get them out of email. Out of the email server so that they can be managed long-term as persistent records. An email server is not long-term persistent storage by design. So, you can use, the integration that Box has to store emails or store attachments into Box. And then, again, by virtue of them being stored in Box, we're going to pick them up, see it, apply the appropriate record policies based on whatever metadata you've captured off of that email. And as well, there are other third-party tools that can integrate with Box and with tools like Outlook, so you can do drag and drop and things like that of emails directly into the repository. And again, that's where we'll apply the record policies, because it's a more long-term persistent place to store records versus an Exchange server, for example.
Absolutely. Very versatile. All right. Let's see. We're going to show the results here of our poll. So we'll just walk through these before we conclude today. So do you have access to Box in your organization? And it looks like majority are no. That's pretty interesting there, Dean. I don't know if you want to add some.
Yeah, small sample size, but
yeah.
But we can see, the other questions, for folks that they're using it as a content management platform. They're using it as a file sharing platform. So it's getting used for a variety of different reasons.
Yeah. So primary use Box, we have other. So it'd be interesting to see what those others are. But yeah,
paper and file shares won't go away as much as we would like.
Right.
We've all heard paperless office for years. It's still not here.
Exactly.
So.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for participating in the poll. If there are no more questions, I think we're going to conclude our session today. I hope everyone enjoyed the webinar. And if you have any more questions, if you'd like to receive a personalized demo of our software, please feel free to email Dean or myself directly, or you can contact Gimmal through our website at info@gimmal.com. Once again, we'll send the recording to everyone within 24 to 48 hours, and we hope you can join us again for our next webinar coming up next week, actually. So thank you, everyone, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day.